Everyone, Pastor George here with our Mailbag Friday, and we got a question from Bill Heller this week, and he asks, this is kind of in relation to the political ones I was answering a few weeks ago. He asks, the point you raised about the American flag in the sanctuary is interesting. Having grown up in CPC, I never thought much about it. I now realize that most churches do not have flag in the sanctuary. So, is this appropriate? So actually, I would say that most churches have an American flag in the sanctuary, at least many that I've been to. I would say basically every church or almost every church of kind of any mainstream denomination that I guess aligns itself kind of in the center, like from the center left to the center right to like more right wing, nearly always have a flag in the sanctuary out of kind of tradition of having these things in there. The history of this wasn't really typical until the 1940s and 50s onward, when a lot of these flags began to be added into sanctuaries, because obviously it was a time of great patriotism in the following of the Cold War, and a time when the church was very instrumental in the state in the sense of fighting against the godless communists, right? So it was very important for Americans across the board to understand that America equals faith and belief in God. Soviet communism equals atheism. And I mean, that's not entirely inaccurate. The Soviets were an atheist state and very anti-religious. So it's not like that was wrong, but it was a mingling of the two. You would be very surprised to find a flag of a country in a Presbyterian church before this point. I think like it depends on the denomination and whether or not it's appropriate. So for a more like church that is comfortable working with the state, it seems very normal to have an American flag. For instance, like the Episcopalian church or something like that, where they kind of say that, if there was a national church, quote unquote, it would be the Episcopalian church. So it's not necessarily wrong to have an American flag in an Episcopalian thing, but I think for Presbyterians, one of the things that I'm big into is kind of just getting rid of all sorts of imagery in the church that I think could be distracting away from God. So I don't think it's appropriate in the context of worship to have it in the sanctuary. I would be fine like having it in the narthex or whatever, and it's not necessarily a hill I'm willing to die on. But I do think that, like, within the confines of the sanctuary, focus should be placed on God, and we should be worried about, whether or not the flag is presented or not. I think there are worse things that you can do or have and still, be disrespectful. But I would be for taking down the Christian flag and the American flag in the sanctuary, just because I don't really think that they need to be there, and and the fact that some people will notice or whatever, I think kind of emphasizes that maybe the fact that they were there in the first place shows that they were a distraction, rather than kind of focusing, because you're focusing on all the other things surrounding worship rather than the worship itself. But I'm pretty Puritan in this. I'm pretty Puritan with my Reformed theology and my outlook on worship. So I would even want to get rid of like the little paraments and stuff that we have in the sanctuary. But that could just be reactionary from my time in college when I worked in the chapel at my school and did the Lutheran and the Catholic services, and they were all very particular about the colors and stuff like that. And that's just deep inside me rooted that, like, I think that's distracting if you care about more about what color of whatever season it is than what we're supposed to be doing. So some of this is definitely reactionary on my part, but I do think there's a good case to be made that distractions in worship should be taken down. Is it appropriate? Like, I think it's appropriate. I would never go to a church and then demand that they take it down, or go to a church and somehow feel like this isn't a real church if they have the American flag in the sanctuary or anything like that, especially because it's commonplace in most churches. I mean, I think there's definitely a line. Like, for instance, I did when I was young, I was a VBS counselor at a big Baptist church in my area of New Jersey. And every morning they would have the kids recite the Pledge of Allegiance to the American flag and the Pledge of Allegiance to the Christian flag. And I even at the time, thought that that was weird because that was just something we never did in my Presbyterian church growing up, is reciting the Pledge of Allegiance. That's something you did in school. And today, I would definitely be against something like that, because in our hearts, we should always be Christians first before anything else. And so to give time to some sort of secular institution during this time that should be for worship and praise is wrong, I think. So I think it's appropriate. I'm not going to rush to do anything, but I would. But if it was like me and I just could have a choice, I wouldn't have them in the sanctuary. So good question. I think that that's not really something anyone thinks about because it's not really a big issue. I understand how minute it is, but I still think it's a good question. So I will see you guys on Valentine's Day for the church service, and then next week with more Theologs. Peace out.